In Parshat Ki Teitzei, in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 21, beginning with verse 10. I'll share with you the opening verses, and then I'll invite others to have an opportunity to read as well. When you take the field against your enemies, and Adonai your God delivers them into your power, and you take some of them captive, and you see among the captives a beautiful woman, and you desire her and would take her to wife, you shall bring her into your house, and she shall trim her hair, pare her nails, and discard her captive's garb. She shall spend a month's time in your house, lamenting her father and mother. After that, you may come to her and possess her, and she can be your wife. Then, should you no longer want her, you must release her outright. You must not sell her for money. Since you had your way with her, you must not enslave her. Kath, would you like to read a little bit, starting at verse 15?
Yes, thank you. If a householder has two wives, one loved and the other unloved, and both the loved and the unloved have borne him sons, but the firstborn is the son of the unloved one, when he wills his property to his sons, he may not treat as firstborn the son of the loved one, in disregard of the son of the unloved one who is older. Instead, he must accept the firstborn, the son of the unloved one, and allot to him a double portion of all he possesses. Since he is the first fruit of his vigor, the birthright is his due. If a householder has a wayward and defiant son who does not heed his father or mother and does not obey them even after they discipline him, his father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his town at the public place of his community. They shall say to the elders of his town, "This son of ours is disloyal and defiant. He does not heed us. He is a glutton and a drunkard." Thereupon his town's council shall stone him to death. Thus you will sweep out evil from your midst. All Israel will hear and be afraid.
Didn't you finish the?
Okay. If someone is guilty of a capital offense and is put to death, and you impale the body on a stake, you must not let the corpse remain on the stake overnight, but must bury it the same day. For an impaled body is an affront to God. You shall not defile the land that your God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, is giving you to possess.
Thank you. Richard, you want to start at the beginning of chapter 22?
Yes, thank you. If you see your fellow's ox and sheep gone astray, do not ignore it. You must take it back to your fellow. If your fellow does not live near you, or you do not know who he is, you shall bring it home, and it shall remain with you until your fellow claims it. Then you shall give it back to him. You shall do the same with his ass. You shall do the same with his garment, and so too shall you do with anything that your fellow loses and you find. You must not remain indifferent. If you see your fellow's ass or ox fallen on the road, do not ignore it. You must help him with it. A woman must not put on a man's apparel, nor shall a man wear women's clothing, for whoever does these things is abhorrent to the Lord your God. If along the road you chance upon a bird's nest in any tree or on the ground with fledglings or eggs, and the mother sitting over the fledglings or on the eggs, do not take the mother together with her young. Let the mother go, and take only the young, in order that you may fare well and have a long life. When you build a new house, you shall make a parapet for your roof, so that you do not bring blood guilt on your house if anyone should fall from it.
Thank you, Richard. Let me invite Steve. Would you like to read a little bit, starting at verse 9 of chapter 22?
When you build a new house,
9. Yeah.
Oh, wait, no. You shall not sow your vineyard with the second kind of seed, else the crop from the seed you have sown and the yield of vineyard may not be used. You shall not plow with an ox and an ass together. You shall not wear cloth combining wool and linen. You shall make tassels on the four corners of the garment with which you cover yourself. A man marries a woman and cohabits with her. Then he takes an aversion to her and makes up charges against her and defames her, saying, I married this woman, but when I approached her, I found that she was not a virgin. In such a case, the girl's father and mother shall produce the evidence of the girl's virginity before the elders in the town at the gate. And the girl's father shall say to the elders, I gave this man my daughter to wife, but he has taken an aversion to her. So he has made up charges saying, I didn't find your daughter a virgin. But here is the evidence of my daughter's virginity, and they shall spread out the cloth before the elders of the town. The elders of that town shall then take the man and flog him, and they shall fine him 100 shekels of silver and give it to the girl's father, for the man is defamed a virgin in Israel. Moreover, he shall remain his wife. He shall never have the right to divorce her.
Thanks. Sherry, you want to read starting at verse 20?
Right, thank you. But if the charge proves true, the girl was found not to have been a virgin, then the girl shall be brought out to the entrance of her father's house, and the men of her town shall stone her to death, for she did a shameful thing in Israel, committing fornication while under her father's authority. Thus you shall sweep away evil from your midst. If a man is found lying with another man's wife, both of them, the man and the woman with whom he lay, shall die. Thus you will sweep away evil from Israel.
Anna, would you like to read a little bit? We're on verse 23 of chapter.
In the case of a virgin who is engaged to a man, if a man comes upon her in town and lies with her, you shall take the two of them out to the gate of the town and stone them to death. The girl, because she did not cry for help in the town, and the man, because he violated another man's wife. Thus you will sweep away evil from your midst. But if the man comes upon the engaged girl in the open country, and the man lies with her by force, only the man who lay with her shall die. But you shall do nothing to the girl. The girl did not incur the death penalty, for this case is like that of one party attacking and murdering another. He came upon her in the open, though the engaged girl cried for help, there was no one to save her. If a man comes upon a virgin who is not engaged, and he seizes her and lies with her, and they are discovered, the party who lay with her shall pay the girl's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife. Because he has violated her, he can never have the right to divorce her.
Thank you. Dave, would you like to read the very start of chapter 23?
No householder shall take his father's former wife as his own wife, so as to remove his father's garment. No man whose testes are crushed or whose member is cut off shall be admitted into the congregation of Adonai. No one misbegotten shall be admitted to the congregation of Adonai. No descendant of such, even in the 10th generation, shall be admitted into the congregation of Adonai. No Ammonite or Moabite shall be admitted into the congregation of Adonai. No descendants of such, even in the 10th generation, shall ever be admitted into the congregation of Adonai, because they did not meet you with food and water on your journey after you left Egypt, and because they hired Balaam, son of Beor, from Pethor of Aram Naharim to curse you. But your God Adonai refused to heed Balaam. Instead, your God Adonai turned the curse into a blessing for you, for your God Adonai loves you. You shall never concern yourself with their welfare or benefit as long as you live. You shall not abhor an Edomite, for such is your kin. You shall not abhor an Egyptian, for you were a stranger in that land. Children born to them may be admitted into the congregation of Adonai in the third generation.
Thank you, Dave. Jim, would you like to read a little bit starting at verse 10 of chapter 23?
Thank you, Rabbi. When you go out as a troop against your enemies, be on your guard against anything untoward. If anyone among you has been rendered unclean by a nocturnal emission, he must leave the camp and he must not re-enter the camp. Toward evening, he shall bathe in water, and at sundown, he may re-enter the camp. Further, there shall be an area for you outside the camp where you may relieve yourself. With your gear, you shall have a spike, and when you have squatted, you shall dig a hole with it and cover up your excrement. Since Adonai your God moves about in your camp to protect you and to deliver your enemies to you, let your camp be holy. Let him not find anything unseemly among you and turn away from you. You shall not turn over to his master a slave who seeks refuge with you from his master. He shall live with you in any place he may choose among the settlements in your midst. Whenever he pleases, you must not ill-treat him.
Thank you, Jim. Let me invite Mark and also Betsy, if you'd like, to begin reading at verse 18.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi. No Israelite woman shall be a cult prostitute, nor shall any Israelite man be a cult prostitute. You shall not bring the fee of a whore or pay of a dog into the house of Adonai your God in fulfillment of any vow, for both are abhorrent to Adonai your God. Keep on going. Okay. You shall not deduct interest from loans to your countrymen, whether in money or food or anything else that can be deducted as interest. But you may deduct interest from loans to foreigners. Do not deduct interest from loans to your countrymen, so that Adonai your God may bless you in all your undertakings in the land that you are about to enter and possess.
When you make a vow to Adonai your God, do not put off fulfilling it, for Adonai your God will require it of you, and you will have incurred guilt, whereas you incur no guilt if you refrain from vowing. You must fulfill what has crossed your lips and perform what you have voluntarily vowed to Adonai your God, having made the promise with your own mouth. When you enter another man's vineyard, you may eat as many grapes as you want until you are full, but you must not put any in your vessel. When you enter another man's field of standing grain, you may pluck ears with your hand, but you must not put a sickle to your neighbor's grain.
Thank you both so much. And David and Susan, would you like to read beginning at the start of chapter 24?
Thank you, Rabbi.
When a man takes a wife and beds her, it shall be, if she does not find favor in his eyes because he finds in her some shamefully exposed thing, and he writes her a document of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her away from his house, and she goes out from his house and goes and becomes another man's, and the second man hates her and writes her a document of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her away from his house, or the second man who took her to him as wife dies, her first husband who sent her away shall not be able to come back and take her to be his wife after she has been defiled, for it is an abhorrence before the Lord. And you shall not lead the land to offend that the Lord your God is about to give you in a state. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, let me borrow your book.
Oh, I'm sorry. When
When a man takes a new wife, he shall not go out in the army, and he shall not cross over on its account for any matter. He shall be exempt in his house for a year and gladden his wife whom he has taken. One must not take in pawn a hand mill or an upper millstone, for one would be taking in pawn a life. Should a man be found stealing a living person of his brothers of the Israelites and garner profit from him and sell him, that thief shall die, and you shall root out the evil from in your midst. Watch yourself in regard to the plague of skin blanch, to watch carefully and the plague of skin blanch, to watch carefully and do so according to all that the Levitical priests will teach you, as I have charged them, you shall watch to do. Remember what the Lord your God did to Miriam on the way when you came out of Egypt.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. Let me invite Robert, if you'd like to read a little bit, starting at verse 10.
Yes, thank you. When thou dost lend thy brother anything, thou shalt not go into his house to fetch his pledge. Thou shalt stand abroad, and the man to whom thou dost lend shall bring out the pledge abroad unto thee. And if the man be poor, thou shalt not sleep with his pledge. In any case, thou shalt deliver him the pledge again when the sun goeth down, that he may sleep in his own raiment and bless thee. And it shall be righteousness unto thee before the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not oppress an hired servant that is poor and needy, whether he be of thy brethren or of thy strangers that are in thy land within thy gates. At his day thou shalt give him his hire, neither shall the sun go down upon it, for he is poor and setteth his heart upon it, lest he cry against thee unto the Lord and be sin unto thee. The father shall not put to death for the children, neither shall the children be put to death for the fathers. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin. Thou shalt not prevent the judgment of the stranger, nor of the fatherless, nor take a widow's raiment to pledge. But thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondsman in Egypt, and the Lord thy God redeemed thee thence. Therefore I command thee to do this thing. When thou cuttest down thine harvest in thy field, and hast forgot a sheaf in the field, thou shalt not go again to fetch it. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all the work of thine hands. And when thou beatest thine olive tree, thou shalt not go over the boughs again. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. When thou gatherest the grapes of the vineyard, thou shalt not glean it afterward. It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. And thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondsman in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I command thee to do this thing.
Thank you so much. Catherine, would you like to read a little bit at the very start of chapter 25?
Thank you, Rabbi. When there is a dispute between men and they go to law, and a decision is rendered declaring the one in the right and the other in the wrong, if the guilty one is to be flogged, the magistrate shall have him lie down and be given lashes in his presence by count, as his guilt warrants. He may be given up to 40 lashes, but not more, lest being flogged further to excess, your brother be degraded before your eyes. You shall not muzzle an ox while it is threshing. When brothers dwell together and one of them dies and leaves no son, the wife of the deceased shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. Her husband's brother shall unite with her, take her as his wife, and perform the Levir's duty. The first son that she bears shall be accounted to in the dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out in Israel. But if the man does not want to marry his brother's widow, his brother's widow shall appear before the elders in the gate and declare, my husband's brother refuses to establish a name in Israel for his brother. He will not perform the duty of a Levier. The elders of his town shall then summon him and talk to him. If he insists, saying, I do not want to marry her, his brother's widow shall go up to him in the presence of the elders, pull the sandal off his foot, spit in his face, and make this declaration. Thus shall be done to the man who will not build up his brother's house, and he shall go in Israel by the name of the family of the unsandaled one.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And Justin, would you like to read starting at verse 11?
Thank you, Rabbi. Let's see. If two men, a man and his brother, are fighting together, and the wife of one of them approaches to rescue her husband from his assailant, and she stretches forth her hand and grabs hold of his private parts, you shall cut off her hand. You shall not have pity. You shall not keep in your pouch two different weights, one large and one small. You shall not keep in your house two different ephah measures, one large and one small. Rather, you shall have full and honest weight and a full and honest ephah measure, in order that your days will be prolonged on the land which the Lord your God gives you. For whoever does these things, whoever perpetrates such injustice, is an abomination to the Lord your God. You shall remember what Amalek did to you on the way when you went out of Egypt, how he happened upon you on the way and cut off all the stragglers at your rear when you were faint and weary, and he did not fear God. Therefore, it will be when the Lord your God grants you respite from your enemies around you in the land which the Lord your God gives to you as an inheritance to possess, that you shall obliterate the remembrance of Amalek from beneath the heavens. You shall not forget.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. That's our entire Torah portion for the week. If you have a copy, I invite you to take out the study sheet. And oftentimes when we begin to have this focused study about our portion, I often begin with some word or phrase from the Torah portion and work through the text itself, and then eventually bring in as an additional tool for exploration into the portion, a painting. This week, I'd like to actually start with the art and then work our way into the text. And I also begin with the recognition that we are now in the early days of the month of Elul. The month of Elul being that time when we are to begin to prepare for the high holy days by reflecting upon our life over the past year. And the number of days between the beginning of Elul and Yom Kippur is 40 days. And I think that's significant that we are engaged in this period of reflection leading to the death of the old self and the rebirth of a new self over the course of a period of 40 days. 40 days representing the period of the flood, 40 days representing the time that Moses was up on Mount Sinai, 40 representing the number of years that the Israelites wandered in the wilderness. There is a significance to the number 40 having to do with a sense of death and rebirth, a sense of revival. So I'd like to kind of also have that as a background bit of context as we get into both the painting, and into our text, because part of the mythology, the sacred mythology about us and about that moment of leaving Egypt is that we were all out Mount Sinai. And so what does that mean to be have been at Mount Sinai? Does that mean that we were somehow on this journey with the Israelites? Well, the mythology is, I think, hinting that it's not that we were there in some kind of past life and actually there, let's say, 3,000 years ago, but that we are on an identical journey that the sacred narrative is in fact describing. And so if that's the case, what is the meaning of try to remember something about that journey? Remember that you were there. And I emphasize this concept of remembering because, as Justin just read, that's how this Torah portion concludes. It concludes with some command that we remember something, and we're going to explore what that remembrance is all about. So, to help us with the notion of what is involved in remembering and what is the reality that we're supposed to remember, that's where I want to take us now into our painting here by Claude Monet, The Houses of Parliament. So first, just a general orientation into the world of the Impressionists. The Impressionists were painters in the mid-19th century who developed a very different sense of what they were looking at when they were looking at reality and what it meant to, in a sense, try to express artistically the reality that they were looking at. And the dominant way of thinking that had evolved ever since the 16th and 17th centuries with the development of experimental science was that there was some kind of objective reality that we could deal with and that we perceived through our senses. This is what John Locke and a lot of other philosophers were talking about and developing into what becomes known as empiricism, that we know reality through our senses, through our observations. And the Impressionists developed a very different sense of that. And this was part of the revolution that they provoked, not just in the world of aesthetics, but in the whole world of what it meant to know and perceive reality. And this is really the beginning of modernity, a very different approach to perceiving reality. And for the Impressionists said that the perception of reality is mediated by our personal emotional life and the life and our memories. And so in that sense, it's impossible to really have a perception of what might be called an objective reality, because by the time we begin perceiving, it's already being filtered through a whole series of past experiences and memories and personal life. And so what the Impressionists did was they sought to place on a canvas, not reality, but their experience of that reality. And they audaciously said, and my subjective encounter of that reality is worth putting on a canvas and worth others engaging with. Okay. So this becomes a form of art, and more importantly, perhaps a way of thinking that was greatly disruptive of mid-19th century art and way of thinking. And here is Monet, who was one of the great Impressionists. And the way the Impressionists would paint is they would encounter reality in the outdoors, and they would then quickly paint it, and they would be painting not so much the tree, but their experience of the tree. Not so much the flower, but their experience of the flower. And here we have Monet, who did a series, 19 paintings that he did of this very same site, the Houses of Parliament with the River Thames in front of them. And he painted them from the very same location, from a hospital balcony right across from the Houses of Parliament. He did these over the course of three years, 1899 to 1901. And you can see that he's playing with, he would paint these at different times of day, different seasons of the year. And what was important to him to portray was not so much the object of the Houses of Parliament, but how he was experiencing the Houses of Parliament at different times of day and different times of the year. And the actual object that is the subject of his painting, both the River Thames, but more importantly, perhaps the Houses of Parliament, which is what he titles the painting. The object of the Houses of Parliament begins to blur into almost an unrecognizable abstraction. And so that becomes less significant than his encounter, which is what he's really trying to express here. What's significant in particular about the series of painting, the Houses of Parliament, and for which he was criticized by many of his followers, is that unlike his earlier works, he didn't just immediately produce his encounter with the world outside of him. With these paintings in particular, he would initially paint them, and then he would take them back, and over the course of some time in his studio, he would refine them. And to many of his early followers, this was a betrayal of the whole Impressionist approach. And Monet was he took a stand and he says, well, this is the way I am producing this, and that's too bad if you feel that way. So here, what's significant is that Monet is not just capturing a perception of the moment, but he is also remembering his perception of the moment. So we're going to play just a little bit further with this notion now that Monet is giving us of one as an impressionist, that he is painting his experience of the world before him. And in addition to that, he's now in this series of paintings, he's trying to paint his remembrance of his experience of that moment. The Impressionists were not just painters. The Impressionists, because of the way that they viewed reality and would begin to express their encounter with reality, also influenced many other forms of creativity, including writing. So the very same year that Monet painted his first Houses of Parliament painting was the same year that Joseph Conrad wrote Heart of Darkness. And here in number 1, we have from the very first chapter of Heart of Darkness, we're introduced to probably the main character in the book, Marlowe. And here's how the narrator describes this moment. We looked at the venerable stream, meaning the Thames, not in the vivid flush of a short day that comes and departs forever, but in the august light of abiding memory. The narrator is describing this boat that he and Marlowe and others are on, sailing down the Thames, and he's describing his encounter with the Thames, not in the moment, but it is being assimilated through a memory. A memory of what? So this is part of what the novel is going to take us into. And of course, the novel as a whole involves Marlowe going into Africa, where he encounters this other significant figure, Kurtz, who has become so morally corrupt and decomposed because of his involvement with colonialism. And then eventually Marlowe emerges out of the heart of darkness, this moment in Africa. And the message from the novel is that, yes, there's this moment of Marlowe going into this actual geographical place called Africa, where he encounters something that is corrupt and evil. But the primary message of the novel is even once one is not in that bit of geography, the heart of darkness is still with us because it's something that we carry with each one of our hearts. So here is in number 2 is a excerpt from a letter that Joseph Conrad wrote to his publisher, who was evidently having some kind of problem with the impressionistic way that Conrad is writing. And Conrad writes in his letter to his publisher, "Explicitness is fatal to the glamour of all artistic work. You seem to believe in literalness and explicitness, in facts, and also in expression. Yet nothing is more clear than the utter insignificance of explicit statement, and also its power to call attention away from things that really matter in the region of art." So the novel Heart of Darkness is taking us on at least 2 different levels. On one level, it's dealing with the historic fact of colonialism and the geographic reality of Africa. On another level, it's dealing with the darkness that lies in the hearts of all of us. That notion, of course, was reimagined by Francis Ford Coppola in his movie Apocalypse Now, which is a reimagining of the novel Heart of Darkness. In Coppola's movie, Africa is replaced by Vietnam, and we have a soldier who's been instructed to go deep into the jungles of Vietnam to deal with a character who's portrayed by Marlon Brando, who has gone mad, who has become morally corrupt and must be eliminated. And so Coppola is using this reimagined version of Heart of Darkness to, on the one hand, say something about the war in Vietnam and its impact and how it corrupted even the best among us from contact with it. But he's also saying something on the second level, as Conrad did, which is, this is a darkness that we each carry within us and we each have to deal with in our own ways. So to take it now into our text, with this being informed by both Monet and by Conrad, and what they mean by encountering reality and how much of it is involved with different levels, both an objective historic level and perhaps a deeper psychic level. I look at the title for our Torah portion, Ki Teitzei, and in my translation, it's rendered this way: when you take the field against your enemies. Well, the verb Ki Teitzei means when, and Teitzei comes from the Hebrew verb to go out, when you go forth, which is a very significant term because that is the term that describes the departure from Egypt. In fact, the entire journey out of Egypt is called Yetzirat Mitzrayim, which Yetzirat comes from the same Hebrew root that gives us our title today, Teitzei. And then we will see, as Justin read to us our concluding verses, remember what Amalek did to you on your way of going out from Egypt. Zeitechem, it's the same word. So there's this notion of going forth, I think, is a key phrase in our Torah portion. And it is a phrase, I think, designed to take us back to the very beginnings of this whole journey, the Yetzirat Mitzrayim, the going forth from, as we talk about at Passover, not just a geographic location known as Egypt, but also as a deep psychological and spiritual place we call the narrow places. So we're on this journey, we're reading about something in this text that on the one level is the journey of a particular people in a particular time in a particular place. Just as we read that in Heart of Darkness, just as we see that happening in Apocalypse Now. But thousands of years before either of those were produced or written, this narrative is doing the same thing. It's describing on the one level, a particular people on a particular journey at a particular time in a particular place, but also something else more enduring is happening there. Oftentimes, it's helpful to turn to teachers from other faith traditions to point out something to us that we may have overlooked in our own tradition. And so here in number 5, from Michael Horton, who is a minister in I believe in the Calvinist tradition, if I have that right. Yes. And he wrote, in our Western Greek intellectual heritage, remembering means recollecting, recalling to mind something that is no longer a present reality. Nothing could be further from a Jewish conception. In the Jewish liturgy, remembering means participating here and now in certain defining events in the past and also in the future. If you turn over this notion of remembering being not a matter of history, but more a matter of internal present psychology and spirituality, is amplified a little bit by a man named Dustin Crowe, who's a pastor at the Pennington Park Church in Fishers, Indiana. And he once wrote, in the Bible, a call to remember is a vibrant, powerful, and participatory concept where we recalibrate our lives according to what's being remembered. It takes us back to this moment of Elul, preparation for High Holy Days. This reflection is an opportunity to consider in the context of sacred literature, our journey now, and our capacity to recalibrate our lives, as Dustin Crowe says, based upon what we are remembering. So when we look at the phrase from that concludes our Torah portion, that we are to blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. So this returns us in a sense to our impressionist painter via another novel, and that novel is In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust. And here in number 8, I share some words with you about that. In Marcel Proust's seminal novel, In Search of Lost Time, a fictional impressionist painter, Elstier, showed off a canvas of a beautiful ocean view where the sea was indistinguishable from the sky. It was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Elstier argued that he was presenting what we actually see rather than what information tells us we see. And he says in the novel, we do not receive wisdom. We must discover it for ourselves after a journey through the wilderness, which no one else can make for us. We have marched through a painting by an impressionist. We have marched through a novel by an impressionist writer, Joseph Conrad. We have marched through Marcel Proust's novel, which is explicitly about remembering and memory, which in the case of the novel is occasioned by an odor of something that was baked in an oven and the way that stimulates experiences and memory. And here, as our impressionist painter in the novel is telling us, our wisdom is not something that we get from opening up a book. It's only by going on the journey itself that we can access the wisdom from that journey. And so Marcel Proust tells us in a writing outside of the novel. My destination is no longer a place, but a new way of seeing. How appropriate is that as we get ready for our high holy days? That the journey that we're on is not taking us to a place, it's taking us to a new way of seeing our lives and of reconstructing our lives with the wisdom that we've gained from reflecting on our journey. And with that, I'd love to hear what you encountered, what you saw, what you felt in the course of our journey tonight. Anna, yes.
Our family had orchards. We had cherries and peaches, and we had apricots. Apricots came after cherries, and we would have lug boxes full of these beautiful fruits. You pick them when they're kind of firm, so they last for shipping and harvest. And the ones that were too ripe on the trees, we always told the pickers, just, throw them on the ground or throw them over the bank. And there would always be some fruit that was missed in the tree. And one of my second grade teacher, who was a widow and had 2 children, was fast. She was just, you have apricots? She said, oh, could I come and just pick some up after you're done? And she and her 2 children would come and they would pick up the apricots. Now, peach cots are really big and ripe and luscious. They make the very best apricot nectar. And when you have one that's ripe in your hand and it's warm from the sun and you pick it up off the ground, it's a little bit fuzzy. It almost feels like holding a tiny bird or a little creature. It almost has a life in it. Now, what we would do is we would just lob them over the hill because they're so mushy. If you put them side by side, they'll smash each other. But to her, each one of those were gems. And they took them home and they made apricot nectar, and all year long, they were so grateful to us. And the thing was, for us, for my family, the apricots were boxes loaded onto trucks, and they became money and income. But for these people, they were a really special gift. But the gift is the new way of seeing, where when you do let someone into your field to glean, it isn't just that you're doing them a favor, they do you a favor, and you become, by following that mitzvah, you are blessed, and you make memories and relationships that far exceed any donation to the poor you could ever have.
Definitely.
The gift is the gift of the Torah, and the mitzvot of the Torah is to bring us closer to each other and closer to God.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you. And let me call upon Rose and then Robert.
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. I thought your exposition of impressionism in writing and everything like that was very interesting. And then you have to look also at what was happening in physics with Heisenberg and Schrodinger's cat and everything, which says kind of the same thing. And then World War I put the icing on the cake of, the science of subjectivity. But I was, I guess, more interested in the text because almost when you read it, it's very like these verses are kind of commingled. And you have some verses and some commandments which are very logical and humane, like leave tithe and leave gleanings, and be honest and don't put your thumb on the scale, and et cetera, et cetera. But then you have, all this homophobic stuff, all this stuff that if a woman doesn't scream out, then she must have wanted it, and things like that are very oppressive, or not letting people who have some kind of defect into the congregation. And what was interesting is Moabites, when, that they weren't allowed to be in the congregation of Israel, and yet Ruth was a Moabite. Like there's a lot of inconsistency It's almost like two people were writing this, like one evil person and one good person. I would like to hear what other people think, because I was really struck by how these commandments kind of, or loggerheads. Thanks.
Thanks. Here's just a real quick thought that you caused me to have, which is that the early rabbis were the ones who would look at this material, and they too would begin to wonder about some of it and see how did it apply and so forth. And they always did it in the context primarily of not kind of an abstract intellectual exercise, but how will this make our lives better? And to the extent we need to find some way to make adjustments to what the literal aspects of it seem to be saying, we will do that because it makes our lives better. The phrase tikkun olam. We will make some adjustments to what the black letter of the law seems to be saying in order to make lives better. So I always find it helpful when grappling with some of these concepts is to figure out, to grapple with them in ways that make our lives better. So that's what the rabbis did. But let me call upon Robert and then Wendy and Mark and Betsy. So Robert, go ahead.
So I have some notes that I'm going to absolutely disregard. Where is Anna?
Right here.
Here I am.
Thank you so much for touching my heart. You know, that's what any scripture, you know, I'm a Baha'i, I'm passionate about my own scripture and I love your scripture. But when somebody can touch my heart, that to me, what is scripture is about. I have a dear friend, she passed many years ago. She has sons and daughters who are the highest level in their field. And you know what she said when it came to talks? I just want someone to touch my heart. And, you know, I just love the fact that you put this in perspective. What is mush in a human being? It doesn't exist. This is God's child. Now, some people can be repulsive. We have to protect ourselves. Those people are rare. But to recognize that every human being is a gift that we can learn from, either our own darkness, we have to turn to the light inside, our creator. You know, that might be the real issue, right? I mean, usually other people aren't the issue, we're the issue, how we interpret it. And I think I've shared this before, but in the Baha'i writings, and I think this is so relevant, it says, of all pilgrimages, the greatest is to relieve the sorrow-laden heart. And what touched my heart is that in your story, your family did that. And thank you. That is more important to me tonight, to have my heart touched with that kind of goodness. Stories are so powerful because they're the other eye. One is narrative to me, one is the word of God. But thank you so much.
Well, I'm glad I was able to speak it, what I thought, what I was feeling in my heart. I'm glad I got the words out right so that you can understand. Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you so much. Let me call upon Wendy and then Mark and Betsy.
Thanks for that, Robert. That's hard to follow. But thank you, Anna, too. My kids would go and pick up the cherries and get the cherries. I would go on the tree and get the cherries because the landlady was allergic. So it just brought a lot of joy. It brought a lot of joy to us. And it was a good relationship too. She was our landlord. But I was going to say two things that bring to mind all of what you brought together with the painting, the heart of darkness. There's many times in this portion, it talks about sweeping away, sweeping that from, and I just thought, and that's what they were looking for too, for a deeper thing to like cleansing. But the verse that I really liked just kind of jumped out at me. Since Adonai moves about in your camp to protect you and to deliver your enemies to you, let your camp be holy. Let him not find anything unseemly among you and turn away from you. But that word holy, and I thought, yeah, they were like camping out. And I never thought, like, here's your campground. You're not even thinking about that, but how much we should do that in our homes. Because Adonai is there.
Beautiful.
I just liked that. And
Wendy,
it's especially a little.
Wendy, could you share a little bit about what you wrote to me about your reaction to the painting?
Oh, okay, if I can remember. Well,
you said you saw the figure.
that little figure.
That
Yeah.
in
The
the
figure.
river.
It was like I saw the figure in a three-dimensional. And I thought, that's so brilliant. And I just wanted to pick that figure up and just kind of bring it into my heart and just find out about who is this and have tea with them and then give him or her and then place it right back down there.
So
and I thought, because the Houses of Parliament, they're actually enforcing rules. And this is what our portion's about. And I thought that's really a great thing to choose for today's portion.
Enforcing rules with such grace and mystery and
So-
grandeur. I
So-
like that.
I'm glad that you both mentioned about rules, because I want to acknowledge that this Torah portion has more laws in it than any other Torah portion. And yet that's not what Torah tells us to remember. It tells us to remember the journey part.
Right.
So the laws on the one hand might seem to be clear and well-defined and something objective that we can try and interpret, but the journey is something that's much more experiential. And the fact that you wanted to reach out to this figure that's in the painting, and I love the fact that the painting has someone in the river, and at the same time as Monet was painting it, Joseph Conrad was writing a novel about someone who's also on the river. And the fact that your reaction was to bring that person out of the painting and into your own home to have a conversation with it, I think is a way to model the respectful and sacred way of dealing with these great works of art, whether it is this painting, Conrad's novel, or the Torah itself, which is to have a conversation with it rather than to analyze it or judge it. So thank you so much for that. Let me invite Mark and or Betsy if you.
Okay.
Yeah.
If there's time, I'd like to have a discussion a little bit about the notion of the 40 days. But before we get to that, I wanted to talk a little bit about this notion of remembrance and the journey, because yesterday we buried my cousin, Rob, who was 55, and we had a Shiva Minyan, and the family gathered at our home, and the experience of remembering his life and the connection that we had with him that continues to inspire us was a sense of renewal. And I think we re-experienced our own lives by reviewing his. It was just a very moving experience. And I'm sure most of these occasions are for people that are in mourning. There was a quote that I read recently that just really struck me, and I'm not going to say it verbatim, but it had to do with this notion of grief, and that what grief is simply the inability of our ability to express love has no place to go, and we grieve then as a way of trying to express this frustration of not being able to share love. But with this Shiva Minyan, we were able to share this love, and we were able to remember Rob in a way that really was very uplifting for all of us.
That's beautiful. Betsy, did you want to share anything? And because what Mark said did prompt me to say something. So if that's okay.
Please go ahead. No, please go ahead.
So, Mark, you're in addition to being a beautiful artist, a leader of prayer services, a writer, a musician. You're also a scientist. You have a scientific orientation, And so you're aware of the principle of conservation of energy, that the energy is never destroyed. It just takes transforms into different forms. And I think that's what in Judaism, we have that notion. And memory is a way of activating that energy that's always present. And so we make, when we remember, we're not remembering something from the past, we're activating that experience into the present as a way of sustaining us and reviving us and guiding us. So thank you for sharing that personal experience with Rob. And I know that his memory will continue to be a source of empowerment as well. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let me call upon Catherine. Please share with us.
Margot wants you to call her too.
What's that?
Yes, Anna pointed out that Margaret would like to say something, and I'll call on Catherine first. Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, just to say that one of the things I took away from this Parshat was the idea that it matters how you represent situations, that this is not just about rules, but also about the way in which people represent relationships. And that it's very important to be authentic to the relationship.
Tell us what that means, to be authentic to the relationship.
Authentic to the relationship in that you don't exaggerate or misrepresent to your own advantage, but rather that you consider both parties in the relationship.
There's a mutuality involved, a respectful.
Yes, there's mutuality. Yes.
Lovely, lovely. So that we encounter others not for the sake of dominating or conquering or discarding or using, but of opening ourselves up to and learning from and sharing with. That's kind of what. Thank you so much, Catherine. Let me call Steve. Did you want to?
Yeah, your memory is sort of selective memory. You forget that Europe colonized all of Africa, and all of this wealth that went to Europe came out of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I was part of Operations Crossroads Africa in '61, and I went up to Congo, and I saw where the Belgians on one side had slaves all up building railroads, and the French on the other side had slaves building railroads all the way to the interior of the country where they could extract the wealth and go back to Europe. That's one of the reasons you have this beautiful art, because all that wealth went into Europe.
Wow, thank you. And another way of perhaps maybe rereading also the whole Tarzan notion, right? Dealing with the Belgian rapacious attitude and what it did to Africa. So thank you about that. Let me call upon Margot. Did you wish to share something? Yeah.
Yes, much of what I wanted to say has already been said, and Rose said very much what I wanted to say. But I'm even more conflicted because the extremes are so large in this portion. So the good is so good, but the payment, the punishment for sin is so extreme that it's disturbing. But at any rate, I just wanted to end with a bit of trivia. I heard or read that Conrad did not learn English until he was 40 years old.
Yeah.
Amazing. And then to be able to write like that.
Fantastic. Thank you.
It came from his heart there.
Let me invite David and Susan.
Well, Rabbi, your response to Mark mentioned a metaphor of Jewish memory regarding conservation of mass and energy, which really struck me. And my picture of that is that when you experience something, where memory is missay is created because you experience something. You're in the world of energy then. Something's happening, it's active, etc. And it quiets down into a solid state of the way energy can become mass. And then Jewish remembering is the act of taking this non-energetic substance, calling it mass, and turn it back into energy.
I think.
So in a very concrete way, the liturgy itself for Yizkor, which we recite, as our prayer of remembrance, the actual text of the liturgy there says, I am remembering this person, and by remembering this person, I am now making a donation for this purpose. In other words, so the remembrance is it's not just I'm remembering this person. The remembering of this person is now activating me to make a donation to make the world a better place. And so that power of the ongoing presence and what it does to us is that's the energy that continues to course through the universe and through us, even though the actual matter has been transformed into something. Let me call upon Richard here.
Yeah, I'm trying to be brief. That's hard for me, but I will. Remember, to me, means remember. It means take membership again in this instance, and that instance is always ongoing. Remember not to forget, and I will never forget this chapter with all its heinous detail about the chauvinism, etc., 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 and to recognize that that's here in this moment, in our nation, in our world. And I am so happy to see so many non-binary young people integrating rather than integrating their unconsciousness with their consciousness and performing the roles not assigned to them by culture, but trying to find a full way to engage in life. And they're taking a lot of flack. LGBTQ is all getting a lot of flack. And remembering this portion, for me, is a way to, how can I be aware of that, and what can I do, and how I respond to that, and who I seek to help with that.
Thank you, Richard.
Because this book is not done.
Yeah.
If that's our final view, and that's how we treat one gender over another, one set of rules over another, it's incomplete. And I almost want to say that, well, that's something to remember. It's something to remain apart on the continued resistance to that. We went through in prior chapters about, well, no, women get some property rights, and well, yeah, a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But when you come down to it here in the final chapters, on the first of the 40 days before Yom Kippur, we're seeing this travesty, and don't forget it.
Thank you, Richard. I want to honor everyone for reading so intently and sharing so much, such a heartfelt way as we're approaching the High Holy Days, getting ready for it during the month of Elul, and as we're approaching the end of the 5 books of Moses. It's good to remember that on the one hand, we are reading indeed the journey of a people called the Israelites, but we're also reading a journey that, as Richard just said, doesn't end with the final punctuation mark in the written text. It's a journey that continues because we're on that journey. And this text is designed to provoke us to be aware that we are on a similar journey, that this is a narrative of, and that we walk through this world, not just aware of it in an objective sense. We're also aware of it through the prisms of our own psyche and our own soul and spirits. And so we sail down this river of life and we encounter it not just through the senses of our eyes, but also through the august light of abiding memory. God bless you all. Thank you so much for coming together and being a part of this rich community. Thank you so much. See you next.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Right.
Thank you.